The security alert came through during Natasha's 10th birthday party. 3 words on Taiho's phone: situation at gate. He stepped into the hallway where his head of security stood holding a tablet, his expression grim. "Sir, there's a man claiming to be family, says he's Natasha's biological father." The world stopped. On the screen, a man in his mid-30s stood at the estate gates, African, confident smile, holding a folder of documents like they were winning lottery tickets. "He has photos, sir, old papers with Miss Johnson's name. He's prepared." Taiho had faced rivals, prosecutors, and assassins, but he'd never faced this, someone who could threaten everything with nothing but DNA. "Where's Rochelle?" "Kitchen, sir." "Bring her. Don't let Natasha see." When Rochelle entered his office moments later, Taiho pulled up the security feed without a word. She looked at the screen. Her face went white. "No," she whispered. "Marcus." "Who is he?" Rochelle's hands trembled. "The man who abandoned me 11 years ago. The man who took my savings and disappeared." She looked at Taiho with desperate eyes. "He's Natasha's biological father." Down the hall, children's laughter echoed. Natasha blew out her birthday candles, surrounded by friends, completely unaware. She had no idea the stranger at the gate was about to make her question everything she knew about family, including who her real father was. Marcus Obi had exactly $47 in his bank account when he saw the photo that would change everything. He was sitting in a Johannesburg cafe, nursing a coffee he'd stretched to 2 hours, scrolling mindlessly through social media to avoid thinking about the men looking for him, the loan sharks, the ones who'd given him 3 weeks to produce 50,000 rand he didn't have. Then the algorithm served him a trending post. Korean business mogul's unexpected family moment goes viral. The image showed a stern-looking Asian man in an expensive suit, and draped across his shoulders, laughing, fearless, beautiful, was a young black girl. But it was the woman standing beside them that made Marcus's coffee cup freeze halfway to his lips. Rochelle. Older, more polished, but unmistakably her. And if that girl was around 10 years old, Marcus did the math quickly. 11 years since he'd left Cameroon. Left Rochelle, left the pregnancy he'd convinced himself probably wasn't even real. Apparently, it had been very real. He zoomed in on the photo, reading the caption, "Tae Ho Kang, billionaire, Seoul." The words blurred together as Marcus's mind started racing through possibilities. This wasn't guilt making his heart pound. It wasn't remorse or paternal longing. It was pure electric opportunity. A man that rich, with that kind of reputation, because Marcus recognized the type, had dealt with them in his failed business ventures, would pay anything to protect his image. And what could damage that image more than a biological father showing up, demanding his rights? Marcus opened a new browser tab and started researching. Within an hour, he knew everything he needed. Tae Ho Kang's business empire, his transition from underground operations to legitimate enterprises, his obsessive privacy about his personal life. And now, Marcus had leverage. DNA, legal standing, a daughter Tae Ho had no biological claim to. He thought about Rochelle's face in that photo. She looked happy, protected, probably didn't think about him at all anymore. Probably told the kids some story about her father being dead or gone or irrelevant. Marcus felt a flash of something. Maybe irritation that she'd moved on so completely. Maybe jealousy that another man was raising his child in luxury while he dodged creditors in cafes. But mostly, he felt calculation. He pulled up flight prices to Seoul. Expensive, but he could scrape it together. Sell his laptop, his watch, the few things he had left. It would leave him completely broke when he arrived, but that didn't matter. Because in a few weeks, he'd either have enough money to disappear permanently, or he'd have legal custody of a child whose stepfather was desperate enough to pay millions to make a problem go away. Either way, Marcus Obi was getting his payday. He'd abandoned Rochelle when she needed him most, taken her savings, and never looked back. He'd built that habit of running from responsibility so thoroughly that fatherhood had seemed like a trap rather than a gift. But now, Now that same daughter could be his salvation. Marcus booked the flight with a credit card that was already maxed out. As the confirmation loaded, he looked at the photo one more time. The girl was smiling at Tae-ho like he'd hung the moon. Marcus smiled too. That was about to change. The house was finally quiet. Natasha had gone to bed hours ago, exhausted from her birthday celebration. The caterers had cleaned up, the guards had resumed their normal rotations, and the decorations still hung cheerfully in the dining room like nothing had shattered. But everything had shattered. Rochelle sat on the edge of the bed she shared with Tae-ho, hands trembling in her lap. He stood by the window, giving her space, waiting. He'd learned over the years when to push and when to simply be present. His name is Marcus Obi. Her voice came out rough, like she was dragging the words from somewhere deep and buried. We met in Yaoundé. I was 23, working at my uncle's restaurant. He was everything I thought I wanted. Tae-ho turned slightly, his face unreadable in the dim light. He had plans, big plans. He was going to start an import business, bring European goods to Cameroon, make us both rich. Rochelle laughed bitterly. I believed every word. When he said he loved me, I believed that too. She could still remember Marcus's smile, the way he'd made her feel chosen, special, like her life was finally beginning. When I got pregnant, he seemed happy at first, talked about marriage, about the family we'd build. For 3 weeks, I thought... She stopped, swallowing hard. Then I came home one day and he was gone. My savings, everything I'd put aside for the baby, gone. Just a note saying he wasn't ready to be trapped. Tae-ho's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I looked for him, called everyone we knew. His friends said he'd gone to South Africa, but no one had details. After 2 months, I stopped searching, had to focus on surviving. Rochelle wrapped her arms around herself. Being a single mother in my community, the judgment, the whispers. My family helped, but barely. I couldn't find work, couldn't afford anything. That's when I decided to leave. Sold everything, got the visa, came here with Natasha strapped to my chest and $50 in my pocket. You never told me his name. Tae-ho's voice was quiet, controlled. In 10 years. Because he didn't matter. He was a ghost, a mistake I'd erased. Rochelle looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. You're her father, Tae-ho. You've been her father since she was 10 months old. Biology doesn't change that. Tae-ho crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. I know that. Natasha knows that. But what if she doesn't? What if Marcus... What if he what? Shows her pictures? Tells her stories? Tae-ho's grip tightened. Rochelle, I've held that girl through nightmares, taught her to read, walked her through her first day of school. I know every fear she has, every dream, every favorite thing. What does he know? He's her biological father. And I'm the one who stayed. Tae-ho's voice was steel wrapped in certainty. That counts for more. Rochelle wanted to believe him, but she'd seen the look on Marcus's face in those security photos. Not love, not remorse. Calculation. He's not here for her, she whispered. He's here for money, for leverage. I know. Tae-ho stood, pulling her up with him, which means this isn't about fatherhood. It's about negotiation. And Rochelle, his expression went cold in the way that once terrified her and now brought strange comfort. Nobody negotiates with my family. Marcus arrived at the Kang estate in a suit he'd borrowed from a contact in Seoul's African expatriate community. Italian cut, good fabric, expensive enough to suggest he wasn't desperate, even though his wallet held exactly $18. The mansion was more impressive in person. Guards at every entrance, cameras tracking his movements, marble and steel announcing wealth in a language that needed no translation. Marcus felt a flutter of nerves but pushed it down. He'd talked his way into boardrooms before. This was just another pitch. A stone-faced security officer led him through hallways that seemed designed to intimidate, finally stopping at a heavy wooden door. Mr. Kang will see you now. The office was understated but powerful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, minimal decoration, and behind a massive desk sat Tae-ho Kang. Marcus had researched the man extensively, knew about the underground origins, the violence, the transition to legitimate business. But seeing him in person was different. Tae-ho didn't look threatening. He looked patient, controlled, like a predator comfortable enough to watch its prey approach. "Mr. Obi," Tae-ho gestured to a chair. "Sit." Not an invitation, a command. Marcus sat anyway, forcing his most disarming smile. "Thank you for seeing me. I know this situation is unexpected." Tae-ho said nothing, just watched with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I want to be direct," Marcus continued, settling into the rhythm he'd rehearsed. "I made mistakes 11 years ago, left when I should have stayed, but I'm here now, wanting to do right by my daughter." He paused for effect. "However, I also understand the reality of the situation. You've raised Natasha. She knows you as her father. I don't want to disrupt that." Still nothing from Tae-ho. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "So, I'm proposing a clean solution. $2 million. In exchange, I sign away all parental rights, permanently, legally. You never hear from me again, and Natasha never has to deal with the confusion of having two fathers." Marcus leaned forward, confident now. "Everyone wins. You keep your family intact, I get to move on with my life, and most importantly, that little girl doesn't get caught in the middle." Tae-ho's expression hadn't changed once during the entire speech. Finally, he spoke. "Have you asked Natasha what she wants?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "I'm sorry?" "My daughter. Have you asked her opinion on any of this?" "She's 10. I managed to laugh. "She's a child. She doesn't get to make these kinds of decisions." Something shifted in Tae-ho's face. Not anger, something colder. He stood slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. "This meeting is over." "Wait, you haven't even—" "My lawyers will be in touch." Tae-ho's voice was quiet, but it carried absolute finality. "And, Marcus, you approach my daughter directly, without supervision, and you won't like what happens next." I felt genuine fear for the first time since arriving. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Tae-ho's eyes were empty of everything except certainty. "You had 11 years to be a father. You chose money over that child before she was even born. Now you want to sell her again for $2 million? I'm offering you a solution. You're offering me nothing I need, because Natasha isn't a problem to solve. She's my daughter." Tae-ho stepped closer, and Marcus unconsciously retreated. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't business. This is family." Marcus left the office with his borrowed suit damp with sweat and his confidence shattered. He'd miscalculated badly. This wasn't going to be easy money. Natasha had always been good at being quiet when she needed to be. It was a skill she'd inherited from her mother, the ability to move through spaces without drawing attention, to listen when adults thought she couldn't hear. Usually, she used it to sneak extra cookies or eavesdrop on boring business talk. Tonight, it taught her something she'd never wanted to know. She'd gotten up for water, padding down the hallway in her birthday pajamas, when she heard the guards outside her door talking in low voices. The biological father situation is getting messy. Boss won't let it go to court. Too much scrutiny. What's the kid going to think when she finds out Kang isn't really her? Natasha's water glass slipped from her hand. It didn't break, thick carpet, but the sound was enough. The guards went silent immediately. She ran back to her room, dove under the covers, and lay there with her heart hammering. Biological father. Kang isn't really her. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The strange man at the gate, her mother's red eyes at breakfast, her father's unusual tension, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Someone else claimed to be her father. The next morning, Natasha found her mother in the kitchen and asked the question directly. "Mom, who was the man at the gate yesterday?" Rachel's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. "Sweetheart, it's nothing you need to worry about. Is he my real dad?" The cup hit the counter harder than intended. Rachel looked at her daughter, this brave, brilliant 10-year-old who'd just asked the question she'd been dreading and knew she couldn't lie. "Come sit with me." They sat at the breakfast table, morning light streaming through windows, and Rachel told her daughter the truth. Not all of it, Natasha was still 10, but enough. A man named Marcus, someone she'd loved once, someone who'd left before Natasha was born, someone who's back now, making claims, causing trouble. "But Dad, Tejo, does he know? Does he know he's not my real dad?" Rachel took her daughter's hands. "Baby, listen to me. Your father has always known, from the very beginning, and it has never mattered to him. Not once, not ever." "Then why is this Marcus person here?" "Because some people only show up when there's something in it for them." Rachel's voice hardened. "Your father, Tejo, he showed up when I had nothing, when we had nothing. He stayed. He chose us. That's what makes someone a parent." Natasha nodded slowly, processing. "Marcus sounds like a bad person for leaving you." "He made bad choices." "Then I don't want to meet him." Natasha's jaw set with a stubbornness Rachel recognized. She'd seen it in Tejo 1,000 times. "Dad is my dad. That's it." Rachel pulled her daughter close, relief flooding through her. That's exactly it. But that night, Rachel found Natasha sitting cross-legged on her bed, staring at a photo from her birthday party. Her and Tejo, his hand on her shoulder, both of them laughing. "Mama?" Natasha's voice was small. "Do I look like him, Marcus?" Rachel's heart cracked. "I don't know, baby. I haven't seen him in 11 years. Do I look like Dad?" "No," Rachel admitted quietly. Natasha traced Tejo's face in the photograph. "But I act like him sometimes. You say that." "You do. You're brave like him, stubborn like him." "Then maybe that matters more than looking alike." Natasha set the photo down carefully. "Right?" "Right," Rachel whispered. But she saw the confusion in her daughter's eyes and knew the seeds of doubt had been planted despite everything. Tejo noticed the change immediately. It started small. Natasha didn't run to greet him when he came home from meetings anymore. She'd look up from her homework, offer a polite smile, then return to her books. No excited chatter about her day. No requests to sit in his office while he worked. At dinner, she was quiet. Answered questions but didn't volunteer stories. The easy comfort they'd built over 10 years felt suddenly fragile, like glass that had developed invisible cracks. "How was school?" he'd ask. "Fine." "What did you learn?" "Math, history, stuff." Where there used to be light, there was now careful distance. Tejo had faced down armed rivals without flinching, had built an empire through calculated moves and unwavering confidence. But watching his daughter pull away, centimeter by centimeter, unmade him in ways violence never could. He caught her watching him sometimes, studying him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Her eyes would drift to the guards stationed outside, to the secure phone he carried, to the way people deferred to him with barely concealed fear. She was seeing him differently now, not as Dad, as Tejo Kang, the man the world knew. One evening, he found her in the library, supposedly reading, but the book hadn't moved in 20 minutes. "Natasha, She looked up, and for a moment, he saw something in her eyes that gutted him. Uncertainty, like she was looking at a stranger. "Can I ask you something?" Her voice was careful. "Always. Why do we have so many guards?" Teho sat down across from her. "Because I've made enemies, people who might want to hurt our family." "Because of your business?" "Yes. The business you did before? The one people talk about?" She wasn't accusing, just asking, but each question felt like a small blade. "Yes." Natasha nodded slowly. "Would I have needed guards if Marcus had stayed, if we'd lived in Cameroon?" There it was, the real question underneath all the others. "I don't know," Teho answered honestly, "but you'd have lived differently. Whether better or worse, I can't say. Normal, though, right? Like other kids?" Teho felt something close in his chest. "Probably more normal than this." Natasha looked back at her book, and the conversation ended, but the damage was done. Rochelle found him that night standing outside Natasha's room, just watching their daughter sleep like he used to when she was a baby. "She's pulling away," he said quietly. "I know. I don't know how to fight this." His voice was raw. "I can't intimidate biology, can't negotiate with blood, can't eliminate doubt with strategy." Rochelle took his hand. "She's 10 and confused. She just learned the man she thought was her father isn't genetically hers, and there's a stranger claiming he is. Give her time." What if time makes it worse? What if the more she thinks about it, the more she realizes... Realizes what? That you've loved her every day of her life? That you've protected her, taught her, been there for every moment? Rochelle's grip tightened. "Teho, you're her father. That doesn't change because she's asking questions." But across the city, Marcus's lawyer was drafting formal custody petitions, and in her room, Natasha stared at the ceiling, wondering what her life might have been like if the man who shared her DNA had been the one who stayed. The distance between them grew wider with each passing day, and Teho, who had never felt powerless, didn't know how to close it. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Rochelle was making breakfast when her phone exploded with notifications. Messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years, links, screenshots. Her hands started shaking before she even opened the first one. The headline read, "Abandoned father seeks reunion with daughter living under crime lord's roof." The article had everything. Photos of Marcus looking earnest and wounded. Photos of Teho from his darker years, being escorted by police, leaving courtrooms, standing with men whose reputations needed no explanation. A tearful interview where Marcus talked about mistakes made in youth and just wanting to know my daughter is safe. He played the victim perfectly. "I was young and scared when Rochelle got pregnant," Marcus told the camera, his voice breaking at exactly the right moments. "I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I've spent 11 years trying to find them, trying to make amends. And now I discover my daughter is living in a world of violence and danger. As a father, how can I not act?" The interviewer leaned in sympathetically. "You're concerned for her safety?" "I'm terrified. Teho Kang has a documented history. I just want to give my daughter the normal, safe childhood every child deserves." By noon, the story had gone viral. Korean news outlets picked it up. International media followed. Social media exploded with hot takes, some supporting Marcus's right to know his child, others questioning why he'd waited 11 years to care. Child Services received anonymous tips that sounded rehearsed, strategic, tips about a child living in an unsuitable environment for minors with a man whose past raises serious concerns. Teho's lawyers called emergency meetings. "Your past makes you vulnerable," they warned. "In custody battles, the court prioritizes the child's safety. Biology matters, and his abandonment happened over a decade ago. He can claim he's changed. You can't claim your history doesn't exist." That afternoon, Marcus appeared on Korea's most popular talk show. He cried on camera, actually cried, dabbing at his eyes while describing the daughter he'd never met, the years of regret, the desperation to be a father. The host ate it up. The audience looked moved. "Do you have a message for Natasha?" the actor asked gently. Marcus looked directly into the camera. "Baby girl, if you're watching, Daddy's here now, and Daddy's going to make sure you're safe." Natasha saw the clip before anyone could stop her. A classmate had shown her during lunch, whispering, asking if it was true, if that was really her real dad. She came home pale and quiet, went straight to her room without speaking. Rochelle found her sitting on her bed, replaying the interview on her tablet. Marcus's tearful face frozen on the screen, his words echoing, "Daddy's here now." "Sweetheart, he looks sad. He looks like he really misses me." "Baby, that's not—" "I've never seen Dad cry. Not once." Natasha looked up, her eyes wet. "Does that mean Marcus cares more?" Rochelle felt her heart shatter. Because how do you explain manipulation to a 10-year-old? How do you tell your daughter that some people are experts at performing emotion they don't actually feel? That tears can be tactical and words can be weapons? Downstairs, Tai-ho watched the same interview with an expression carved from stone. Marcus had declared war, and he'd done it where Tai-ho couldn't fight back, in the court of public opinion, using Natasha's confusion as ammunition. "I want to meet him." Natasha spoke the words at breakfast 3 days after the interview aired, her voice quiet but firm. Taeho's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Rochelle went completely still. "Absolutely not," Taeho said. "Why not?" Natasha looked at him directly, and there was something new in her eyes, determination mixed with hurt. "If he's my father, don't I have the right to know him?" "He's a stranger who abandoned you." "So everyone keeps saying, but I want to decide that for myself." Her chin lifted in that stubborn way that was pure Taeho, even if biology said otherwise. "You can't protect me from this. It's already happening." Later, after Natasha had gone to school, Rochelle found Taeho in his office, staring at nothing. "We have to let her," she said quietly. "No." "Taeho, she needs to see who he really is. Right now, he's this idea in her head, this man who cries on TV and says he loves her. If we keep her from him, we make him more powerful." Rochelle sat across from him. "But if she meets him, she'll see the performance up close. She's smart. She'll recognize it." "And if she doesn't? If she sees what she wants to see?" "Then at least she made the choice herself." Rochelle's voice was steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "We can't force her to choose you. She has to want to." The meeting was arranged at a neutral cafe, supervised and public. Security posted nearby, but out of sight. Marcus arrived early, bringing gifts: a stuffed lion, a bracelet with Cameroonian beads, a photo album of relatives Natasha had never met. He stood when she approached, his smile warm and careful. "Natasha, oh my God, you're so beautiful." Natasha studied him with the same intense observation she'd inherited from watching Taeho negotiate for years. "Hi." They sat. Marcus ordered her hot chocolate without asking what she wanted, then launched into stories. About Cameroon, about her grandparents, his parents, who would love to meet her someday. About the culture she came from, the language, the food. "I know I wasn't there," Marcus said, his voice heavy with practiced regret. "I made terrible choices, but I want you to know I thought about you every day. Wondered what you looked like, if you were happy, if you were safe." "Where were you?" Natasha asked, simple, direct. "South Africa mostly, trying to build something, make money so I could come back and be the father you deserved." He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "I know this is confusing, having two fathers, but you don't have to choose right away. We can take time, get to know each other." Across the cafe, Tejo sat with his coffee untouched, watching his daughter smile at another man, watching Marcus lean in, charming and warm, saying all the things a confused 10-year-old needed to hear. He'd fought gang wars, survived assassination attempts, built an empire from nothing. But watching Natasha laugh at something Marcus said, actually laugh, was the most helpless he'd ever felt. "Would you like to meet again?" Marcus asked as the hour ended. "Maybe go to a museum, or I could teach you some Bamileke phrases." Natasha glanced toward where Tejo sat, then back at Marcus. "I'll think about it." Marcus smiled like he'd already won. "That's all I ask." Outside, Natasha was quiet as Tejo's car pulled up. She climbed in without speaking, clutching the stuffed lion Marcus had given her. "Well?" Rochelle asked gently from the front seat. Natasha looked down at the gift in her lap. "He seems nice." 2 words that felt like a knife in Tejo's chest. Nice. Tejo's investigator delivered the report at midnight, apologizing for the hour but knowing his boss would want it immediately. "You were right to dig deeper, sir." The file was thick. Financial records, intercepted communications, witness statements from Johannesburg. Tejo read through it with the methodical focus he'd honed over decades, his expression growing colder with each page. Marcus Obi wasn't just broke, he was drowning. Failed businesses stretching back years, a restaurant in Cape Town that folded after 8 months, an import venture that collapsed under debt, a consulting firm that was really just Marcus convincing desperate people to invest in schemes that never materialized. And the debts. 50,000 rand to a loan shark named Bengu, a man whose collection methods made Tejo's old crew look gentle. Another 30,000 to various creditors. Eviction notices, arrest warrants for fraud that Marcus had fled before they could be served. But the most damning evidence was the communications. Text messages to a lawyer in Seoul sent 2 days after Marcus had seen Rochelle's photo. Found major leverage. Target worth 500M plus. Biological father angle. Need custody filing ASAP. An email to a contact. "One big score and I'm gone. New identity, new country. This Kang guy will pay anything to make me disappear." A voice memo Marcus had recorded to himself, probably drunk, probably careless. "The kid doesn't matter. Never even met her. But she's worth millions to me now. Just gotta play the concerned father long enough to get settlement. Then I'm ghost. Again." Tejo closed the file and looked at his investigator. "This is verified?" "Every piece. We have the original communications. Voice analysis confirms the memo is his. The debts are documented through official channels." The investigator hesitated. "Sir, he never intended to be a father. This was always extortion." After the man left, Tejo sat alone with the evidence of Marcus's true nature. Part of him felt vindicated. He'd known from the first moment what Marcus really was, but another part felt only devastation. Because this information would destroy whatever fantasy Natasha was building, would shatter the idea that maybe, somewhere, she had another father who actually cared. Rochelle found him at dawn, still at his desk, the file open in front of him. "You didn't sleep." "Read this." He pushed it toward her. Rochelle went through it slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to anger to something that looked like grief. When she finished, she was shaking. He called her leverage, his own daughter. "She's not his daughter. She's a financial instrument." Tejo's voice was flat. "He never wanted to know her. He wants to use her. We have to tell Natasha." "Do we?" Tejo looked up at her. "She's 10. She's building some image in her head of a father who made mistakes but cares now. This will destroy that. Do we have the right? Do we have the right to let her believe a lie?" Rochelle's hands gripped the desk. "She's already pulling away from you because she thinks Marcus is genuine. If we don't show her the truth, she'll hate us for taking away her fantasy. Or she'll hate us later for letting her believe it. They sat in silence as morning light filled the office. Outside, somewhere in the mansion, Natasha was probably just waking up, maybe looking at that stuffed lion Marcus had given her, maybe thinking about the grandmother she'd never met. "The custody hearing is in 2 weeks," Tejo said finally. "His lawyers will paint me as dangerous and him as reformed. They'll say people change, that past mistakes don't define present intentions. But we have proof his intentions haven't changed. He's still running the same con, just with higher stakes." Tejo picked up the voice memo transcript, staring at Marcus's words. "The kid doesn't matter." "We tell her," he decided. "But we don't ambush her with it. We prepare her first. Let her know that sometimes people perform emotions they don't feel." "She's 10. Will she understand?" "She understood at 10 months old that I was safe when everyone else was afraid. She sees things clearly." Tejo's jaw tightened. "We just have to trust her that she'll see through him too." But in his gut, he knew the truth. Seeing clearly and accepting what you see are two different things. And sometimes, children would rather believe a beautiful lie than face an ugly truth. The courtroom was smaller than Natasha expected, less dramatic. Just wood paneling and fluorescent lights, and people in suits speaking in careful, legal language that made everything feel distant and unreal. Marcus's lawyers had spent an hour painting Tejo as a reformed but fundamentally dangerous man. They'd shown photos from his past, cited arrest records, mentioned associates who'd met violent ends. They painted Rochelle as someone who'd fled her country illegally and exposed her daughter to an unstable environment. Then they presented Marcus, the remorseful father, the man who'd made mistakes in his youth but had spent years trying to find his daughter, who just wanted to provide a normal, safe life. "He's offering stability," Marcus's lawyer argued, "a fresh start away from violence and criminal elements, a chance for this child to know her heritage, her family, her roots." Tejo's lawyers countered with evidence of abandonment, financial irresponsibility, Marcus's pattern of failed ventures. They presented the intercepted communications, the texts, the emails, the voice memo that laid bare his true intentions. "This man views Natasha as leverage, not as a daughter," Tejo's lawyer stated coldly. "He abandoned her once for money. Now he's returned for more." Marcus's team called it taken out of context, said desperate men say desperate things, that it proved nothing about his capacity for love now. Back and forth, evidence and counter-evidence, two versions of truth battling in careful legal language. Then the judge turned to Natasha. "Miss Kang, you're old enough to have a voice in these proceedings. I'd like to hear from you directly." The courtroom went silent. Natasha stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady when she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what makes someone a father," she began. "Everyone keeps talking about biology and DNA. Marcus keeps saying we share blood, that we're connected." She looked at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging smile. "And that's true. He is my biological father." Tejo's world tilted. "But I also thought about what a father actually does." Natasha turned to face the judge. "A father shows up, not just once for photos and interviews, every single day. When you're sick at 3 in the morning, when you have nightmares, when you need help with homework or someone to practice your speech with, or just someone to sit with you when you're scared." Her voice grew stronger. "Marcus wasn't there when I was born. He wasn't there when I took my first steps or said my first words. He wasn't there when Mom had nothing and we were hiding in a supply closet because we had nowhere else to go. But Dad was." She looked at Tejo now, and her eyes were clear. "Tejo Kang has been there for every single moment since I was 10 months old. He taught me to read. He protected us when people tried to hurt us. He chose us when he didn't have to." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I saw the evidence. The messages where Marcus called me leverage, where he said I didn't matter except for money." Natasha's voice didn't waver. And I thought about the interview where he cried on TV and how I'd never seen Dad cry. At first, I thought maybe that meant Marcus cared more, but then I realized Dad doesn't perform his feelings for cameras. He just shows them through his actions, every single day. She turned back to the judge. Blood doesn't make you a parent. Showing up does. And I choose the father who's been showing up since I was a baby. I choose the man who chose me first. Natasha's voice was absolutely certain. I choose Dad. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Given the evidence of Mr. Obi's true intentions, his documented pattern of abandonment, and, most importantly, the child's clear preference and well-being, custody remains with Mr. Kang. Mr. Obi's petition is denied. Marcus started to protest, but his lawyer pulled him back. Outside the courthouse, Marcus tried one last time. He approached Natasha with practiced tears in his eyes. Baby girl, I know you don't understand now, but I understand perfectly. Natasha's voice was cold in a way that was pure Tae-ho. You left Mom when she needed you. You took her money. You disappeared for 11 years, and you only came back when you thought I was worth something. She stepped closer to Tae-ho, who put his hand on her shoulder. You're not my father. You're just the man who happened to be there when I was conceived. That's all you'll ever be. She walked away without looking back. That night, Natasha found Tae-ho in his office. Dad? He looked up, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Wetness. Not quite tears, but close. Can we make it official? The adoption? Can we do it legally so there's never any question again? Tae-ho couldn't speak, just nodded. Natasha crossed the room and hugged him the way she used to when she was small, fiercely, completely, like she was the one protecting him. I'm sorry I doubted. You had every right to question. Tae-ho's voice was rough, but you chose clearly. That took courage. I learned from the best. And finally, the Steel King cried. Just a little. Just enough. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't won with power or strategy. They're won by a 10-year-old girl who understands that family isn't about biology. It's about who stays. 6 months later, the papers were finally official. Natasha Marie Johnson became Natasha Marie Kang on a Tuesday morning in a government office that smelled like coffee and old carpet. No drama, no fanfare. Just a judge's signature, a stamp, and 3 people whose lives had been legally bound to match what their hearts had known for years. Rochelle cried through the entire 5-minute ceremony. Happy tears this time, relief tears, the kind that come when something precarious finally becomes permanent. Tae-ho signed his name with hands that had held weapons and signed death warrants, now signing adoption papers that meant more than any deal he'd ever made. When the clerk handed him the certificate, official, stamped, irreversible, he stared at it like he was memorizing every letter. Natasha just smiled, that fearless, knowing smile she'd had since she was 10 months old. The celebration that evening was small, just family. The guards had learned long ago that family in the Kang household wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up, who stayed, who chose to be there. Mrs. Chen, who'd given Rochelle her first job and looked the other way when she'd hidden a baby in supply closets, brought a cake. The head of security, who'd watched Natasha grow from a crawling infant to a fierce 10-year-old, gave her a photo album of every birthday she'd celebrated in the mansion. 10 years, Rochelle said softly, standing next to Tae-ho as they watched Natasha laugh with the household staff who'd become her extended family. 10 years since I was hiding in that supply closet, terrified you'd find us. I did find you, or rather, she found me. She knew before any of us did. Knew what? That you needed us as much as we needed you. Rochelle leaned against him. She saw past the Steel King to the man who'd forgotten he had a heart. Tae-ho watched Natasha, Officially, legally, permanently his daughter, and thought about that day 10 years ago. About a fearless baby who'd crawled toward danger like it was safety, who'd decided with the clarity only children possess that he was worth trusting. She'd been right. He'd spent 15 years being untouchable, having nothing to lose, building an empire on the foundation of his own isolation. Then a 10-month-old girl had grabbed his ankle and everything had changed. She'd made him vulnerable, made him care, made him human again, and he'd become something stronger for it. "Dad!" Natasha called from across the room, holding up the certificate. "Can we frame this?" "We're framing 3 copies, one for every room." Natasha laughed, rolling her eyes in that way that was equal parts Rochelle's warmth and his own dry humor. "That's excessive." "I'm excessive. You knew this when you chose me." "I did choose you, didn't I?" She crossed the room and hugged him. "Best decision I ever made." Later, after the guests had left and Natasha was asleep, Teo found himself in her doorway again. Old habit, watching her like he used to when she was small. Rochelle joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Marcus sent another message today, through his lawyer, asking if we'd reconsider some kind of visitation arrangement." "What did you say?" "I said no, that Natasha made her choice and we're respecting it." Rochelle paused. "Was that wrong?" "No." Teo's voice was certain. "He had his chance. He chose money, we chose her. That's the difference." On Natasha's nightstand, the stuffed lion Marcus had given her sat untouched in a corner, while the worn book Teo read to her every night for years lay open and dog-eared. Some gifts are just objects. Others are 10 years of showing up. "She was right, you know," Rochelle whispered. "In the courtroom. Blood doesn't make you a parent. Love does. Presence does. Choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. That's what makes you a father." Teo looked at the certificate in his hand, proof that what his heart had known for a decade was now legally, officially, permanently true. "I used to think family was weakness," he admitted, "that caring made you vulnerable. And now? Now I know it's the only thing that makes you strong." In her sleep, Natasha smiled, safe and certain in the home built not by blood, but by choice. By a mother brave enough to hide in supply closets, by a baby fearless enough to crawl toward danger, and by a man who learned that the greatest power isn't in being untouchable, it's in being loved. You know what gets me about this story? It's that Marcus probably still thinks he's the victim. He probably tells himself Teo bought the judge, or Rochelle poisoned Natasha against him, or that money won like it always does. Because people like Marcus can never accept the simplest truth, that a 10-year-old girl looked at both of them and chose the one who actually showed up. That's what makes this story hit different. This wasn't about wealth versus poverty, or biology versus adoption, or even good versus evil. This was about presence, about the quiet, unglamorous work of being there, day after day, year after year, when nobody's watching and there are no cameras to perform for. Tae-ho Kang had everything working against him: a violent past, a dangerous reputation, no biological connection to Natasha. But he had the one thing Marcus never did. He stayed. When it was hard, when it was inconvenient, when a crying baby disrupted his empire and made him vulnerable in ways bullets never could. And Natasha? That little girl saw what adults spend lifetimes missing, that real love isn't loud. It doesn't cry on talk shows or show up with gifts after 11 years of silence. Real love is boring. It's bedtime stories and homework help and being there at 3 in the morning when nightmares hit. So here's my question for you. If you were Natasha, what would you have chosen? Would you have picked biology, the connection of blood, the appeal of normal, the father who said all the right things in that cafe? Or would you have picked history, 10 years of protection, the man who held you through every storm, the father who earned it? And here's the harder question. If you were in Taeho's position, would you have had the courage to let Natasha make that choice, knowing she might not choose you, knowing that love sometimes means risking everything and trusting that it's enough? Because that's real strength right there. Not the Steel King who intimidated rivals, the father who stood in a courtroom and let his 10-year-old daughter decide his fate. Some of you might think Marcus deserved a second chance, that people change, that past mistakes shouldn't define you forever. And maybe you're right. Maybe in another story, Marcus came back genuinely reformed, truly sorry, actually ready to be a father. But this isn't that story, because Marcus's own words, "the kid doesn't matter," proved he hadn't changed at all. He was running the same con, just with higher stakes. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Natasha made the right choice? Should Taeho have shown her the evidence earlier? Or was Rochelle right to let her see Marcus for herself first? And would you have been brave enough at 10 years old to choose the harder truth over the prettier lie? If this story reminded you that family is built, not born, that the people who show up are more important than the people who share your DNA, hit that subscribe button, because I'm here every week with stories that challenge what we think we know about love, loyalty, and what it really means to be family. Stories about imperfect people making impossible choices, about children who see clearly when adults are blinded by fear, and about how sometimes the most dangerous person in the room becomes the safest person in your life. Because the best stories aren't fairy tales. They're about real people choosing each other every single day, even when, especially when, it would be easier to walk away. Natasha crawled toward the Steel King when she was 10 months old because she saw something everyone else missed. 10 years later, she chose him again, not because she had to, because he'd proven every single day that she should. That's what family looks like. Until next time, choose the people who choose you. Silent Speaks Story, where every story leaves a mark.